It's Tuesday, so it's Tea Time Tuesday to talk about things that no one else is talking about. And I'm going to kick it off with the fact that, shockingly, after all the craziness happening on Capitol Hill, there is some sort of bipartisan support that I can actually get behind. And this is the U.S. House Intel Committee challenging the intelligence community as to whether or not their findings regarding Havana syndrome back in 2023 had some information suppression. So basically, Congress is calling out the agencies to say, hey, you guys are lying to us and withholding information. So this is huge because this will basically, depending on what the panel finds, this could reopen the debate over the root causes of Havana syndrome and who is actually responsible for this. So to give some context here, in 2023, 7 agencies worked together to figure out what the heck Havana syndrome was and who was behind it. And Havana syndrome, the name even came about because it started in 2016. There was a U.S. government worker in Havana that woke up with these really killer brain pains, almost like scrambled eggs, a loud noise, vertigo, nausea, being unable to completely focus. And it was really troubling when it was reported within the U.S. Embassy in Havana, Cuba. And from there, that information kind of spread amongst the government, and people started to realize that maybe they were also victims of this Havana syndrome. So why does it matter, right? Suddenly, all of a sudden, government workers, contractors, diplomats, defense officials are beginning to feel these similar symptoms. There were personnel evacuated in Vietnam. You had cases in Berlin, all over the world. It's pretty interesting that Kamala Harris, actually, Vice President Kamala Harris, she was going to visit Vietnam, and one of the reasons why her trip was delayed in Vietnam was because there were reports of this Havana syndrome, which then by default kind of looked like some sort of targeted assault, because this is, again, happening around government employees, it's happening at government institutions, and then it's happening just ahead of a vice presidential arrival to another country. In September 2021, one of the aides to the CIA director, William Burns, reported symptoms consistent with Havana syndrome 2 on their way to India. Vienna, that's kind of when, all bets are off. In Vienna, Austria, it wasn't just diplomats and intelligence officials. Now, all of a sudden, children of these U.S. employees are getting hit. And if this was all just a bunch of nothing, then why would the Austrian government say that it was going to work with the U.S. government in collaborating with U.S. investigators on the matter in Vienna? So it's not like this is just, it sounds like it's a movie. It sounds like it wouldn't be true at all, that there's some sort of weird phenomena happening where people hear a loud noise and just like lose their marbles, but it's true. White House officials getting hit in London. 2020, this is when it gets even crazier. All these are happening between 2016 to 2019 overseas. And then all of a sudden in 2020, which again, everyone seemed to think that that was completely fine. But in 2020, at the Ellipse, at the White House, the South Lawn, there's another hit for Havana syndrome, similar symptoms. So now all of a sudden it's on our home base and the government wants to do more about it. And so at the time, investigators did report to the Senate Armed Service Committee and the House Armed Service Committee in April of 2021 at this point, saying that they haven't been able to even determine the cause of the events or who is responsible. So think about it. It's like hard to wrap your head around the fact that these things are happening and our own government doesn't have the answers and is basically on the reactive side of trying to catch up with what's going on. So that answers the what and why, but the how. Like, how is this actually happening? Is it a bioweapon? Is it not? The reason I say bioweapon or some sort of neurostrike is because the intelligence community initially launched their investigation 2 years ago with the premise of, hey, there's an assumption that this is a foreign actor targeting Americans, but then also that maybe this is some sort of portable technology. So a report by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine said that the potential causes could actually be radio frequency energy. So they're also feeling the same exact way. Chemical exposures or some sort of psychological factors. But after coming out with that a year later, they said, you know what? we're pretty worried that this might actually be Russia, some sort of foreign adversary, and it is a weapon. You even had doctors at UPenn, where I went to school, go Quakers. You even had doctors at UPenn, Penn Medical, saying that they've never even seen these symptoms before. I think they looked at about 20 cases of people with Havana syndrome within the government, and these symptoms were unremarkable and showing some sort of new syndrome that has public health implications. So all that's pretty damning, all that's pretty darn scary. And then all of a sudden, after a comprehensive study of 1,000 cases led by the CIA, it was, you know what? This actually isn't a foreign adversary. We have no evidence that points to a foreign adversary. And so by default, that's not, there's no weapon involved. And this is probably what they say is natural causes, environmental causes, undiagnosed medical conditions, and stress. Like, these are the reason why people are losing their marbles and they all happen to be in the government. I don't think you could lose your mind really in the government, because if you work in the government's really slow and has great benefits and pretty consistent pay. Even when there's a government shutdown, you're in a pretty good spot. So I feel like it's like the last place that people are going to be like stressed and losing their mind. You know, like, try going to medical school, try being a lawyer. There's some stress up in there. I don't think there's much stress happening with government employees, especially you're in Vienna. That sounds like a vacation. You're in Vietnam. Vacation. You're in London, vacation. So I don't know. Maybe I'm misguided in that, but I highly doubt it. And I guess I'm not the only one with doubts, because why else is Congress asking the agency and the other the whole intelligence community, if these findings are actually legit? And if this wasn't legit at all, then why would the Biden administration put out the Havana Act, where if you apply and get approved, you can receive up to almost $190,000 in compensation for having Havana syndrome? So I don't think I'm just like talking out of my noggin. Like, these are real things. So this definitely can be a real thing, because back in the day, the U.S. Embassy in Moscow was hit with microwaves that gave long-term effects to U.S. government employees. That was intentional. Why can't it be intentional now? That's pretty much the closest thing that you can find mimicking what's going on today. And, you know, add it to the list of like, are aliens real? Do we really have shooters that are transgender and from El Salvador and also care about freeing Palestine? Like, there's no story that's too weird. There's no story that's too psychotic. So, yeah, talk about a neurostrike weapon by Russia or some other foreign adversary, and the government trying to cover it up. Sounds like this congressional letter is pointing to just that.